As I'm sure all of you know, the primary basis of my experience is in software engineering. However, much fewer of you know that I have some, if a very small amount, of proficiency for physical electronics and electrical work. In this video, I'd like to go into what I've learned at what times and why it interests me. That was way too normal of an introduction to a YouTube video. Brace yourselves everyone, this video is going to be traditional. The first thing that I think is the most important to cover is the traditional electrical hobbyist work that most DIY inclined people learn. Learning how to rewire a plug, learning the basics of how mains power works, learning how to run cable and prepare Ethernet, and various bits and pieces extra besides. The kind of things that you would learn from your dad over a weekend or two, and in fact that's where I got quite a lot of it. Some of it was from other things online. I distinctly remember learning to rewire a plug from Tom Scott, but all that, fairly basic stuff. I use it fairly frequently. It's the kind of thing that everyone does to some extent. It was when I started learning about microcontrollers, like Raspberry Pis and this weird little thing called an Arduino, that things started to get interesting. My first Raspberry Pi that I actually owned and didn't steal from my brother, he had an original Pi, was a Raspberry Pi 2 Model B with a quad-core CPU and a whole 1 gig of RAM. This thing, surprisingly enough, still works. It outlived my Raspberry Pi 3, which died due to unknown circumstances, despite being nearly squished to Kingdom Come in my bag one time when I brought it into school for Why Not. I use this for retro gaming, desktop programming, playing Minecraft Raspberry Pi Edition, running a media center for a time, running server softwares, and for a small period of time being my only server. That wouldn't last. Nowadays, I use many Raspberry Pis for Nickel Smart Home, using them as Home Assistant command hubs that are more performant than my little Pi 2 ever could be. But what of the Arduino? I'll tell you what, I only used it a little bit. I have 2 Arduino Unos and a couple Arduino Nanos, and while I've used them for a couple things, a notable example being my DT, non-examined assessment, where I used electronics board to bump up my atrocious performance producing a model of my device, I'd like to point out we had no budget to do these, unlike what would have happened when we were in school, and this photo of me working on it was taken on a certain day in October 2020. We all know what happens next. Still got a B. Tangent aside, this kind of forgetting to do things happened with a lot of what I wanted to do going into physical electronics. I had wanted to allocate so much more of my time into this with my intention to build up my ability in building discrete electronics, learn the process and how these devices work, and it's still an option or even an intention, just not one immediately on the docket. I bought myself a bunch of electrical parts, starting with the simple resistors and LEDs and the interesting stuff, to much less interesting parts like capacitors, diodes, power gear regulators, and ICs. I had wanted to do so much more that got lost into time. It's something I do want to take up as a hobby though, that I can slowly integrate into my working life. While I still do some more electronics-y things, for instance, I made use of an ESP32 board to communicate with my PC's power button across my office network, and I've done similar work with these boards before. I have a particularly good Valentine's Day present planned for one, but I'm not going to say what it is because my partner watches these videos. But my intention for learning the electronic stuff is to read a bunch of books and do a bunch of hobby projects. I don't mind wasting the components I bought anymore because the main matter in my mind is that I'm learning, and since a number of these components have been sitting in storage for close to a couple of years, it might be high time I actually get to that. But with all of that said, here's the usuals. If you're looking for mobile apps, desktop software, server-side applications, or websites, consider heading to my software business website at nickelsoft.co.uk. If you're looking for smart homes, head to nickelsmarthome.co.uk, and that's it. Cool. Nice.